All right, so on these inlays, first you'll put one layer of tape on this. I like to use either like the green tape or the foil, orange stuff. Really any of it works good, but you gotta watch out because sometimes like on these, I don't know what's going on, temperature or wax is bad or something, but I'm getting some like adhesive bleed through or whatever, and the tape doesn't want to come off, but it's really not that big of a deal. Anyways, so one layer of tape on the bottom. The plastic foil tape works great for that. And then another layer on the top. Now, you're gonna have to go into this knowing like kind of what you want to do, like maybe draw on the first layer of tape, and then figure out where the outskirts of that inlay are gonna be, and take your tape and run a line, the outside line, or where the outside of the inlay is gonna be, which, I mean, this is consistent down here. So that way, you don't have to go, if you got straight lines out here, you don't have to go and draw those. They're already done for you with the outside of the tape. So then you could just take this and already be on the outside, you know where the center's at. So I like to layer the tape different directions. Two reasons for that. The bottom layer needs to run opposite direction, or perpendicular, or whatever the hell it's called, to the long part of your inlay. So the bottom layer would be running layers this way, and the top layer that's actually going to be the shape of the inlay would go that way. The reason being is that way when you go to look at the line on the bottom to cut it out, you're not confused with multiple lines running this way. There's no question about what your inlay is. Also, when you go to cut this top layer of tape out, it's easier to pull off. It's not going to pull the bottom layers of tape up because it's going the opposite direction. So make your lines. This was done with a Mobile Solutions template, just the oval. I laid it on there, made the line. This part here is just the outside of the oval template, and then the front of it was just an arc. Or actually, it could have been the outside of the oval. I don't remember. So once that's done, do your layup. I use 6 layers of 1.5 ounce mat for this. Ends up being a little bit less than 1/4 of an inch thick, maybe 3/16, a little bit more than that. This is the 404 resin from US Composites. Super good shit. I dye it black, obviously. And it's very important that you know how to do a layup before you start doing this, because if you're just throwing a bunch of pieces on there, if you like overlap pieces, try to piece it together, it's not going to turn out right. You're going to have way more finishing work. You can see the very little amount of body filler on here, and I could probably completely get rid of that with one more pass with some sandpaper. I probably have like maybe 2 minutes sanding all these pieces, and you can see that they're perfectly flat with very, very little body filler. I use like a mini foam roller, the little bitty ones. They're not really foam, they're like bristles or whatever, to put this on. So I roll the resin on the mat. It works much better that way. You can use a spreader too, but using a chip brush, it's gonna suck because it's gonna be inconsistent. You're gonna have bumps and ridges. So use a roller, a spreader, something like that. So once it's done, you'll pull it off. Make sure and let this shit dry all day. You'll pull it off, and you'll see your tape line on the bottom, or like this, the tape that stuck to it. Obviously it was a different color, so there's no question about where the inlay was at. So I cut that out with an air saw, pretty much up to the line. It's not gonna matter if it's a little teeny bit smaller, just make sure you're not gouging it out to where you can't fix it. Take a DA on the edges and make it the perfect shape. Get it all right. And another thing you need to watch out for on these inlays is you're going to be body filling these. So you want all these edges to be 90 degrees. You don't want them at an angle, especially around curves like this. You want to make sure they stay 90 degrees. Otherwise, you might not be able to pull this piece out once you body fill it. So when that's done, after it's sanded down, I like to sand on the top of it. No body filler. Don't fill the top yet. You'll have leftovers for that. Stick it on, or first I take the 1/4 inch cant tape and I'll wrap this around all the edges off of the template. So It can kind of suck sometimes around curves, but it's important. So wrap 2 layers if you're doing 2 layers of vinyl. And then, since this is not exactly a 1/4 of an inch, you're gonna have to go around with a razor blade. You'll want to make that line up with the bottom edge here, that Kent tape, and then go around with a razor blade and trim off the excess off the top very carefully, because it will pull off, but just go along and trim it so it's perfectly on there. You don't have a bunch of bumps, because if you leave that excess when you go to body fill it, it's going to roll over, it's going to be uneven. Kent tape doesn't sand very well, so don't do that. But this is done with 1 pass, 2 passes maybe. With the right filler and the right additives, you can make it work. But I use Kent tape to stick this on. The reason being is then it's gapped for vinyl. If you use template tape, it's going to be flush, so use Kent tape, and then you'll have a little bit extra so you can gap for vinyl. When you pull it off, you're going to have some that seeps under here. You'll want to go along. I haven't done it on this one yet. Go along with a flat blade screwdriver, works great, or some kind of a scraper, and scrape this edge off, because then if you just try to wrap with that on there, it's not going to sit right. So you want to go and scrape that off, and then this should fit perfectly in there, gap for vinyl. Another thing, these are perfectly pressure fit, so you shouldn't need to attach these with anything when they're done if you want to be able to remove them. Sometimes I still CA glue them on, or use some nice double-sided Tessa tape, the real thin stuff. Either way, they turn out to be 100% perfect most of the time. So the other thing you want to do that is pretty important if you're going to go back and work on these pieces, you want to try to get all this body work done when you're doing around the edge here. Because if you go back and do this when it's off of here, you risk it warping, breaking it, getting the edges messed up. You don't want to do that. So make sure and do all this body work on the top when it's attached to this piece. And then also, before you pull it out, since you know when it's in there and you did the body work on it, it's exactly where it needs to be, drill some guide holes in it. I drilled 4 in this one, 2 in this one. That way, if you need to stick it back in there and refit anything, you know exactly where it needs to go. There's no guesswork. So just drill some little guide holes, stick your drill bits in there. You know exactly where they need to go. And it also, pieces like this you can pull out from the back, but like this is going to be impossible to pop out of here unless you drill a hole in the back of it. But since it's a sub box, I don't want to do that. So drilling those guide holes, you can take a screw and twist it in there and pull the panel out, because these aren't the easiest thing in the world to get out. A lot of people thought that I just sanded these gapping for vinyl. You don't want to do that. I mean, if you absolutely have to, do it, but it's going to be 100% perfect if you use the Kent tape. If you sit there and hand sand it, I mean, obviously you're running the risk of not having it perfect. So, but that's pretty much it. Just see it there. I'm all about them gaps. So make sure the Kent tape and 6 layers on this, and yeah.